Good morning. Welcome to the Ethical Humanist Society. My name is Bobby Jacob, and I'll be moderating today's program, Understanding Ukraine, 30 Years of Turmoil. I'll start out today's program with a quote that helps define what humanism means to us as members of the Ethical Humanist Society. Humanism is a democratic and ethical life stance which affirms that human beings have the right and responsibility to give meaning and shape to their own lives. It stands for the building of a more humane society through an ethics based on human and other natural values in a spirit of reason and free inquiry through human capabilities. It is not theistic, and it does not accept supernatural views of reality. And that is from the Humanists International. At the EHS, our program addresses a wide variety of topics, including current events, philosophy, arts and sciences, to name just a few. Today's presentation is part of our ongoing programming relating to current events and politics. Our speaker today is Olga Rudenko. Olga is the Deputy Chief Editor of Kiev Post, an English language newspaper in Kiev, Ukraine. She reports on various topics and leads a multicultural team of journalists. She started at the Kiev Post in 2011 as a reporter. She contributed to the newspaper's coverage of the Ukrainian Revolution and Russian aggression that won the Kiev Post the Missouri Honor Medal for Distinguished Service in Journalism in 2014. She co-founded Lustrum, an online magazine that pioneered explanatory journalism in Ukraine. She's a board member at the Media Development Foundation, a nonprofit organization strengthening local journalism in Ukraine. Ukraine celebrates 30 years of independence this year. In this short time, the nation has endured 2 revolutions and an ongoing bloody war with Russia. It has also been drawn into US domestic politics, where it played a role in the impeachment of Donald Trump. The rise of disinformation in Ukraine worsened during the COVID-19 pandemic, leading to the lowest vaccination rate in Europe. To help us understand this second biggest post-Soviet nation, Olga will describe Ukraine's historical setting and take us through its current challenges. Please welcome Olga Rudenko.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me. Thank you for introducing me. I have to open up by saying that you're very welcome to interrupt me at any point. And if you can't hear me well, because I tend to speak, I'm of course amplified here, but I tend to speak very fast and not very loud. So if I'm going too fast, just let me know. So in general, feel free to stop me at any time. I love talking about Ukraine. I could be talking about Ukraine for way longer than 40 minutes. So when I was thinking about what the focus of this thing can be, I really thought that I should try to explain the origin of Ukrainian nation, the history, because the current turmoil, the problems that we have now, the war with Russia, it is all roots in those centuries back. So I'll try to walk you guys through give you a very fast course in the history of Ukraine, especially the 30 years of independence. And if you have questions, so what happened, between that and that, feel free to ask me. I actually had a very good discussion of Ukraine yesterday with one of the professors at the school, which is in Gauss, and he asked questions that I didn't even know the answers to. And they were not factual questions. They were so why did this happen this way? I'm wow, I never thought of it like that. So I would really benefit from your questions too. So a little bit about me. Yes, as said before, I'm the deputy chief editor at Kiev Post. I will tell you a little story about the Kiev Post at the end of this presentation. That's going to be interesting. But I've been in journalism for 12 years. I'm 32, so I started doing this at 20. I've been at Kiev Post for 10 years out of those 12. And for the past, I think, 4 years, I've been in this role. We are a newspaper in Ukraine that reports in English. Only in English, and our audience is both in Ukraine and abroad, and we call ourselves Ukraine's global voice. So think, yeah, I wanted to put up some photo that illustrates my work, and this is, I just found it on my Facebook. This is me last year interviewing the Prime Minister. This looks nice, but in fact, 99% of my work is sitting at my computer, editing stories. But sometimes I get a photo like that. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of get a sense of the audience, and I know that most people are watching this online, so they won't participate in this, but the people who are here, anything you know about Ukraine, anything that comes to mind, any association or just anything at all?
The bullying and oppression of Ukraine.
Of Ukraine, okay, oppression of Ukraine by
them, the
okay.
Russians.
The Russians, okay.
And also by Stalin.
And also what?
By Stalin.
By Stalin, okay, I should talk about that a bit. Yeah, so that's good that you know. Okay, I was kind of like expecting some stereotypes to come up here. I did not expect the Stalin thing. Thank you for that. But yeah, so the common thing that I hear about Ukraine when I'm traveling is sort of misconceptions that are very enthralled in the narrative. And you know, what people say, it's cold. You know, when I was preparing to come to Chicago, everybody was like, "Oh, that's great, but it's so cold." And that's what people often tell me about Ukraine. In fact, it's a normal climate, pretty much the same as Chicago, but with a less cold January and February, as I understand. It's dangerous. That's a very frequent thing that comes up because we have the war. People who would consider Ukraine as tourists would actually, you know, not go. They would write to their friends in Ukraine asking, "Is it really dangerous? Like, is it safe for me to come to the capital city and walk the streets? Like, you know, you have this war and everything." It's actually not dangerous if you're not at the war front, which takes up a very small portion of Ukraine. I'll talk about that later. I actually checked crime rates by country when I was preparing this, and it turns out that Ukraine and the United States have almost identical crime rates. It's 47 point something for both of them. It's number 56 and 57 in the global ranking. So that's just a funny fact. Much less gun violence though. It's part of Russia. Yeah, I get that a lot. You'd be surprised, but people do confuse Ukraine and Russia. I get things like, "Oh, you're from Ukraine, so what is the weather like in Moscow right now?" Yeah, I do get that. So the short answer is no, it's not part of Russia. It's not been exactly part of Russia, but it hasn't been under Russian influence since, formally, since 1991. It's the Ukraine. So if you want to, if you're talking to somebody who's Ukrainian and you want to come across as really, knowledgeable about Ukraine or sensitive to Ukrainian issues, don't use the article "the," because I know that it's been a norm in the English language, but many Ukrainians are actually pretty sensitive to this because it kind of like signifies that this is like a part of some country, not an actual country. So if you can you think of another country with a similar problem? Argentina. Argentina was the Argentina, right, in the English language for like sometime in the 20th century, and now it's not. So just Ukraine, not the Ukraine. Nationalist and anti-Semitic, this is something that comes up in Western media sometimes, especially since 2014, because we had a revolution, a bloody revolution, where nationalist movements played some role. So in fact, nationalist parties, nationalist politicians are almost not represented in the political process in Ukraine. Like we have one political party that is nationalist, and it's being elected in a very small proportion to the parliament once in Ukraine's history, and it's not right now. So, and the anti-Semitic thing is also, I added that because I actually was asked about it. Is Ukraine anti-Semitic? And I thought like, there are probably some people who are, but Ukraine's current president is Jewish. So that's the answer to your question. Not that you asked, but to this thing. So some key facts about Ukraine. It's been independent since 1991. So if you do the math, this is 30 years of independence this year. It is actually the biggest country in Europe. Of course, if you don't count Russia, that takes up, it's both in Europe and in Asia. But it's the biggest country that is wholly in Europe. But it's still just 4 times, this is a mistake, 4 times as big as Illinois. No, that's right, sorry. It's just, my coffee hasn't hit in yet. So 4 times bigger, like 4 Illinois is Ukraine, okay, in terms of size. Population 43 million or so CIA thinks. I added that because I actually took the number from a CIA information bulletin that is published online. Ukraine has not had a census of population in, I think it was 15 years, something like that. So the last time we counted was sometime in the 90s, and it was at 52 million. And we know that definitely a lot of people left. There is a very big, we have a big problem with labor migration because people go to Poland and some other countries in the EU to work, and they often stay there. So there is it's actually a really big demographic problem. So it is an estimation that we are at 43 million right now. The GDP per capita is pretty low, as you can think from the number. Of course, it is estimated that at least half of the economy is in the shadow. So keep that in mind. But still, even if you add that, it's going to be pretty low. Ukraine is fighting the only ongoing war in Europe with Russia, and I'm going to talk about that later. And it had its territory annexed by Russia in 2014, and it still remains in this status. I'll talk about that too. Oh yeah, I put on this this image to give you the idea of why. Or at least this is the most common interpretation of why Ukrainian flag is what you see in the right corner. Ukraine is mostly a very flat country. Agriculture is a big thing. So this field of wheat was against the blue skies, usually thought to be the inspiration for the flag. A little anecdote. Apparently, a long time ago, back in history, the Ukrainian flag was actually the other way around. It was yellow and then blue. And there's kind of an urban myth or legend. So some people actually believe that Ukraine's current problems with corruption and the war and everything that's happened is bad luck because the flag has been upside down. So that's a very marginal belief, but it's there. So I want to talk a little bit about the origins of Ukraine. And what you see here is a medieval state called Kievan Rus. Well, we call it a state, but it was actually like a loose federation of like mini states. And it existed in 9th through 13th century. This outline that you see there, that's the territory that it had in 12th century, I believe. So I don't have like a pointer or something, right? But okay, I can use that. So the modern Ukraine is like approximately here, and this part is Belarus and Russia. So right now, all 3 states, Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia, they kind of see themselves as they see Kievan Rus as their ancestors, and there is a certain, like, between Ukraine and Russia, there is a certain tension as to which state is the actual, successor to Kievan Rus. Yeah, I have this in because if you've ever heard about Kievan Rus, you probably saw it in this spelling, I-E, Kievan. I'm using Y-I. And the same for the capital of Ukraine. Like, you can see both. In most sources, you will see probably I-E still. But in many, it's popping up as Y-I, and this is the name of my paper, also Kiev Post Y-I. So the answer is one spelling is taken from the Ukrainian language, one spelling is taken from Russian language. The languages are somewhat similar, but very much not the same, and I'll talk about that later. So again, if you want to, if you ever talk to a Ukrainian in messaging something, and you want to come across as, knowledgeable or even pro-Ukrainian, you use the YI spelling. Yeah, this is a one-slide fast course in how what we know now as modern Ukraine was part of different states throughout history. So this is what you saw already. This is Kiev and Rus. And here on this picture, you can see a little better how it's related to the modern borders of the states. So a bit of Russia, almost the whole Belarus, and half Ukraine was Kiev and Rus. So after the breakup of Kiev and Rus, several states popped up. You can't really read those, but those are states called Livonia and Prussia, and there was a Kingdom of Poland and the Duchy of Lithuania. Those are medieval European states that all claimed, some of the territory of Kiev and Rus. Again, the names you see here are the modern borders and modern things, but the colors represent the medieval states. So this is 17th century, so not exactly medieval. And then, of course, Russian Empire and Soviet Union. For several hundred years, Ukraine was, the territory of Ukraine was part of Russian Empire, and then for 70-something years, the Soviet Union. And even in those times, Ukraine was within the empire, and then Soviet Union. Ukraine was like a separate entity. It had its own name, and so it was not exactly amalgamated with Russia, but it was completely controlled by Russia. And so the impact that it had on Ukraine is suppression of Ukrainian language, because the official language of the empire was, of course, Russian, although you may know that the Russian nobility preferred to speak French for quite a while. That's a different story. It's just funny. But there was suppression of Ukrainian language, and the Ukrainian language almost didn't, for many years, it did not make it to, was not represented in culture. So the first work of fiction that is written in what we now know as modern Ukrainian language is in 18th century, which is quite late. So yeah, and it of course was a political instrument for Russia. Like if you marginalize Ukrainian language and position it as this is the language of the villagers that live somewhere there, but in the cultural sphere and in the capitals would speak Russian, then it's gonna do something to the people. It's gonna make them feel like they're not a separate nation. So they continued it throughout the Soviet Union years in the 20th century. Actually, in 1917, Ukraine proclaimed independence, but it was very short-lived because the Bolsheviks took over, and yeah. So technically, the proclamation of independence that happened in 1991 was our second proclamation of independence. One thing that I should probably mention, that in the 17th century, the thing that you see here in, I don't know if you can see it, but in the red contour here, are the Cossack states. Cossacks were this military group that was self-organized and was not part of any country, and kind of ruled controlled this area. And then notoriously very freedom-loving and independent, and they are a major symbol in today's Ukraine. Yeah, Stalin, we come to Stalin. So this is the only point that I wanted to stop on from Ukraine's Soviet years, because it has a very big impact on I think on Ukraine today and on the positioning of our history. And so Holodomor was an artificial famine that was forced on Ukrainians, mostly Ukrainian villagers, by the Soviet authorities in 1932. We don't know how many people were killed. The estimation is between 4 and 7 million. What happened was actually very simple. In 1932, in the fall, when the harvest was collected, the Soviet authorities, using force, just came to all the villages and took all the food, like not even leaving them anything, like not like this is a little bit for you to survive the winter. No, just everything. And there's still the arguments going on between historians about what exactly was the purpose, because it's not like Stalin wrote somewhere in a diary or something, I'm doing this because of this. But I think the consensus is that it was there was no reason to do it. It's not like they needed this food somewhere. It was actually done this way to oppress and suppress the villagers, and to because at that time for some time the collectivization was happening, and all the villagers were forced to become part of collective farms. But apparently there was certain revolt against that among Ukrainian villagers, which was like the major part of the population of Ukraine at that time were living in villages. So that is considered to be something that Stalin used to kind of break the spirit of Ukrainians. And this was not talked about at all until the end of the Soviet Union. Like people would whisper about it in the kitchens, but it was not anywhere. You wouldn't read about it in the news or something. So Ukraine is now fighting actually to have all the governments in the world to recognize this as genocide. And of course, Russia is on the other side saying this, it just happened, it wasn't forced, and so on. There's I don't have the name here, right? Okay, but there's a very good movie about it called. Oh my God, I'll have to I think look it up the name, because I know the name as it was translated into Ukrainian, but I don't think that's the actual name. Could be something like. No, that's not, definitely was a very creative translation of the name. So I'll pull it out later, and it's a very good film about both the famine and about journalism. Like if you probably know Walter Duranty, yeah. So he's featured, like his story is there too. He's like the kind of the villain in the movie. If you're interested in learning something about history of Ukraine and how the controversial or complicated points in Ukrainian history are used by propaganda today, in 2018, the Kyiv Post did this series of 13 stories about just explanatory stories about certain points of Ukrainian history, like things like why Ukrainians speak Russian, or how Kremlin falsifies history of Kiev and Rus to undermine Ukrainian statehood. So I recommend it. It's a good series. I'm not sure I recommend watching the videos that go with it, because we were only beginning to do video production back then. It's on a very amateur level, but the stories are pretty good. And if you look up Honest History Kyiv Post, you'll find it. So the Soviet Union ended, and in 1991, Ukraine finally proclaimed independence after approximately 700 years of being parts, Ukraine's territory being included in different states, Russian Empire, Soviet Union, Poland, Lithuania, finally independence. And there was always, I must say here that there was always, throughout the Soviet time, there was a dissident movement of people who were fighting for independence in every way that they could think of. And this photo here is the lawmakers in the Ukrainian parliament on August 24th, 1991, when they proclaimed independence. It later was also confirmed at the referendum after that, but this is the kind of the historical moment. And then the 1990s came. it was not a fun time in Ukraine. It's actually interesting because when you the 90s are kind of here they're making a comeback in pop culture and people are nostalgic about the 90s, the music and the clothes and everything. In Ukraine and in probably in most countries of the former Soviet Union, the 90s was not the same as here, let's say, put it like that. It was a transitional time from communism to capitalism. All the supply chains were broken up because all the states within the Soviet Union were very interconnected. So that all went to hell. There was what you see here was a very normal picture at the time. This is a line of people lining up because they sign there says groceries. This is a grocery store that they're lining up for, and I guess the grocery store had meat that day, so that's the line. I actually remember that, because, not this photo, I took it from the internet, but I actually remember lining up for food because I'm born in 1999, and I do remember that my mom and my grandma would take me with them to line up for butter, because butter was given for, they need an extra person, because then you get an extra portion of butter sold to you, something like that. So that was fun. So I make a jump from 1990s to 2004. I have to talk a little bit about the birth of oligarchs. Yeah, the 1990s was a time when certain entrepreneurial people realized that this is their moment. This is the start of capitalism. And they remember I said how the supply chains were broken down. So it didn't just involve things like food. It involved things like there are steel factories in Russia and Ukraine that used to the factory in Ukraine would produce something for the factory in Russia, and there was a whole circle. Everybody knew where everything goes, and that suddenly ended. And these factories and plants did not know how to work in a market. So the entrepreneurial people started doing things like they started working like intermediaries. Like they would take the production, take the something that this factory produced, and found a place to sell it to. And then so they started doing little things like that. Then they realized that why trading with factories if you can own the factories. Because from this trade they accumulated some money, they started buying out the factories from the state during privatization. And that's where the high-level corruption really kicks in, because they realize that if they can influence the government, then the government can tweak the price of this factory, something that is offered for sale, and they can get these factories for peanuts. So we come to 2004, and this is really a very important point in history. Up until that, so this was the election where we were electing our third president. The previous two were not exactly polarizing; they were pretty neutral, I would say. This is the first election the first presidential election in Ukraine, where the pro-Russian versus pro-Western vector really comes into play. And those were the candidates in the election. I just wonder, can you guess from the pictures which one was pro-Western and which one was pro-Russian? Like the guy on the left, which one is he? Pro-Western, yeah. And the guy on the right was pro-Russian. So, yeah. During the campaign, there was not one clear leader. It looked like people were inclining to vote for the pro-Western guy, for Yushchenko. But it was kind of it could go either way. But Viktor Yanukovych, the guy on the right, he was kind of the handpicked successor to the president that served before that. So they really needed him to win. They ended up trying to rig the election, but before that, they did something else. The pro-Western candidate, Viktor Yushchenko, was poisoned several months before the election, and you can see what it did to his face. He was poisoned with a thing called dioxine. I'm not sure how it is pronounced. He survived it barely, but it really, changed his appearance during the campaign. And can you think of any country that is known for poisoning people? Yeah, not pointing any fingers, but. Oh, by the way, we don't know who did that. There was an investigation, but no result. So this is very important. This is probably the most important slide in this presentation, actually, because this kind of illustrates the differences between Ukrainian East and Ukrainian West. So this particular slide is it is based on a poll that was done quite recently, a couple years ago, 3 years ago probably, where people were asked to answer whether they speak, whether their first language is Ukrainian or Russian or both, and you can see how it changes the East. The East is Russian speaking, and then the West is Ukrainian speaking, and in the middle it's a lot of people are saying both, or half people say Russian, half Ukrainian. So what they did in the 2004, the people from the Yanukovych camp, from the pro-Russian guys camp, they brought political technologists from Russia who kind of invented the whole polarization thing. They they framed the election in choosing between the West and the East, between basically America and Russia. Although America is so far away, but it's kind of seen as the signal post somewhere there if you're looking west. So and this would come up in every election since. In every election since, the candidates would try to play to this sentiment of the East is Russian speaking, so they have more pro-Russian sentiment. The West has more is Ukrainian speaking, and they don't like Russia, and they have more they're more inclined to vote for a pro-Western candidate. So they've been in every election since then, they've been trying to kind of amplify that issue and manipulate it and use it. Okay. I did that. Yeah, so they rigged the election. The election took place in the end of 2004. And there were reports of very serious violations at the polling stations, and it was very obvious to the public that something is off, that this election cannot be trusted. Like the level of violations was too high. So Viktor Yushchenko, this guy, he called on his supporters to go to the main square in Kyiv, in the capital, to protest the rigging of the election. And this is. I don't know if you can see it, but it's a very big square completely filled with people. The orange was the color of his campaign. So that's why the Orange Revolution. So they protested for a while. It was peaceful. And just because of the sheer number of people who came out and who stayed there, they had camps, tents set up on the square, and they stayed there for weeks protesting. Just because of the sheer volume of that, several weeks later, the authorities ordered a re-election, and Viktor Yushchenko won. I kind of spoiled that, but you can guess who won after Viktor Yushchenko. The guy who didn't win the first time. So 5 years later, the pro-Russian guy who did not win that time because the election was rigged in his favor, but the revolution kind of undid that. So he comes back and he actually wins this time fairly. And the reason why a pro-Russian candidate could win is that this area in the East is more industrialized and more densely populated. So basically, if you look at how the population is spread, these areas are going to be somewhat less populated. These areas are going to be somewhat more populated. So if you're a pro-Russian candidate back then, if you win like this, then you got it. By the way, there is no electoral college in Ukraine. So it's a very simple election. So he wins, yeah, and he comes in and he's as bad as everybody feared he would be. He's oppressive. The media start experiencing more pressure than before. Independent TV stations were shutting down, and he was every year accumulating more power and kind of taking over more and more. The corruption level was well, it's hard to calculate it, but it was very evident. It was everywhere. All the top officials were obviously stealing millions and millions of dollars just from the lifestyle. So, and that was. I'm gonna talk about it a little more, but I just want to. This is probably the best thing that came out of the Yanukovych presidency. And this is a little moment that happened during the ceremonial laying of this flower wreaths to a monument dedicated to World War II. This is Yanukovych, and next to him doing that simultaneously is Dmitry Medvedev, who was Russian president at the time. Remember, there was a time when Putin kind of stepped back to be prime minister because he couldn't do 3 terms in a row. So Dmitry Medvedev was his puppet figure to serve as president instead of him. So this is what happened. Never stops being funny. It was, I don't know, 8 years ago. It's still funny. Oh, I'm sorry. No, I don't mean to show it again. So an important moment came in 2013. Here's what happened. Ukraine was discussing signing a so-called association agreement with the European Union. An association agreement is something that a country that kind of hopes to be a member of EU someday, but is still very far from that in terms of economy and other reasons, signed with the EU as a kind of like the declaration of this, what's the word, intentions. So in November 2013, the key moment came when Yanukovych had to decide whether Ukraine will sign this. And a lot of people in Ukraine were really expecting that, because the pro-Western sentiment was very strong, and people associated the Western vector with less corruption, more reforms, maybe in the future free travel with the European Union, which is very important for people. So what happened was, in the last moment, Yanukovych kind of turned his back on the EU, and he instead announced that Ukraine will be moving towards a closer relationship with Russia. That's not the moment when it happened. It's a different thing, but it kind of illustrates the thing. So here's what happened. It was November 21st. 2013, and this news break that Ukraine, all the hopes for the EU future shattered, and Yanukovych is choosing Russia. And this happens on top of 3 years of constant reports about corruption and so on. So a high-profile journalist writes a Facebook post that says, I don't know about you guys, but I'm not okay with that. And I will be coming to the main square this evening at 9 p.m. to protest that. Just reply in the comments if you're with me. And a lot of people replied, and a protest started. And this is what it became. So the revolution of dignity, as we call it, or the Euromaidan revolution, the Euromaidan thing, I need to explain it. Maidan is it's Ukrainian for square. And this square is called Maidan. So Euromaidan is the name of that revolution because it was for the European choice of Ukraine. And it happened in Maidan, so that's our term, but we also call it revolution of dignity. So it started as a peaceful protest. Then it took this scenario of the Orange Revolution in 2004. People set up tents. You can see the tents here. the whole square turned into a big camp of protesters. And then, like a couple weeks later, the protest started dying down. Like there was only a handful of people in the street, being there in the Maidan all the time, but it was obviously dying down. Also, it's like end of November; it's really cold. So, what do you think they did? They tried to use the force against it. They sent troops, kind of riot police troops, to chase away the break away the camp and chase away the people with force. That somebody caught that on video, and they did it during the night. That was caught on video, and next morning, the protest went full force. Like many more people than before came out. So it was really that big mistake on the part of authorities to use force against protesters. Against the protest was already dying down. So until from that point on, it was peaceful for a while, but then in like a month or so, it actually got violent. And the reason it got violent was that the government, the parliament, passed legislation that was limiting the freedoms of protest. Like it was something ridiculous, like 3 people can't be together in a public place, something like that. Maybe I'm exaggerating, but only a little bit. And the direction was very bad. So they again kind of like stirred it. And at that point it came to this. This is during the last days of revolution in February 2014. And riot police were using guns against the protesters, and protesters were using mostly Molotov cocktails and rocks. Although there is evidence now that there were some guns among the some protesters had guns, but mostly it's Molotov cocktails. And this is a barricade in the square that you saw in the picture earlier. It was a very strange and very emotional time. I was reporting there, and I cannot begin to describe what it felt like seeing this happening in what you know is a very peaceful city. And we were all really scared, but at the same time excited for the future of the country, because this really showed an amazing spirit of unity, and people were ready to sacrifice so much to just to not go back to being with Russia, and not go back to being, but basically not to go back to the Soviet Union. Over 100 people were killed, most of them protesters, but at least a dozen, probably more, police officers were also killed. And at least 60 of the people were killed in one day, like the last day of the revolution. And I was, and how am I doing on time? What do you have?
We'll end at 11:50. You can speak for another 10 minutes.
Okay. I'll go fast. Okay. So when this was happening, when the last day of the revolution was happening, it was complete chaos. And we didn't know, we knew that some people were getting killed because it was making it in the news. But we didn't know how many. There was no official count yet. So we did the only thing that we could do. There were several points in this protest area, where protesters were bringing the killed ones, the bodies. I think there were 4 or 5 points like that, and we sent a journalist to each one of them, and they were counting the bodies and just sending the information to the editor. And I was at one of these locations. Mine had 5 or 6 bodies. So I would send it to the editor, and then the editor would add numbers from everyone, and we actually were pretty accurate in the end on the estimation of how many were killed. If you want to learn more about this, I really, really recommend. I'll just show maybe a few seconds of this. This is a movie on Netflix, a documentary called Winter on Fire. And it's
European Union leaders and Ukraine have failed to sign an historic free trade deal.
Хотели на корне сразу это все поломать, задавить, сразу, чтобы даже никому повадно не было. Но реакция оказалась обратная.
Yeah, so I really recommend this documentary. It's called Winter on Fire. So the consequences of the revolution were that the president, the guy who was hit by the rest, he actually fled to Russia. Like one day after the killing of 60 people happened, it escalated so much that he basically packed and fled to Russia. And there are videos of his staff packing like luxurious items from his house in several huge trucks to take it away. So Yanukovych lives in Russia and still considers himself to be the legitimate president of Ukraine all these years later. Ukraine elected a pro-Ukrainian, it was seemed that way, president, and a very pro-Ukrainian and pro-Western government. Russia, however, saw the opportunity, and just days after Yanukovych fled, Russia actually invaded Crimea. Crimea is, I think I should have shown you the map. Yeah, so this peninsula is Crimea. So yeah, days later, and Ukraine could not, it was in complete disarray. We had sort of like an interim government, but there was nobody in the government offices who would have the, the will or something to actually send the army there or something. And I don't know, honestly, I don't know if we could have done anything by sending the army there, because Russia is just stronger. So basically, while we in Kyiv were figuring out who's the next, the interim government and everything else, Russia just took Crimea. And Crimea remains to be annexed. Russia considers Crimea part of it. The world does not recognize it, but the situation there now is that they have Russian currency. They consider themselves part of Russia. Another thing that Russia did, Russia instigated separatist protests in eastern Ukraine. So remember when I showed you that this map, this is the Russian-speaking area. And what happened was there were suddenly people, like a couple of weeks after the revolution won in Kyiv, there were suddenly people in eastern Ukraine, in big cities, staging these protests, saying, putting out like really fake narratives, like the people from Kyiv, the government from Kyiv is gonna do something terrible to us because we're the Russian-speaking people. So they kind of tweaked it, like, so those were the pro-Western people who won, and now there's gonna be some repressions against us, the Russian-speaking people. It was so far from the truth that it was kind of early for calling it fake news, but that was fake news. And people were actually saying things like, and I went to do the reporting to a couple of those protests. So I talked to people who would come to the streets and say things like, we want Russia to take over and protect us from Kyiv. These people live in Ukraine, and this is their country, and they think that people from the central authority are going to come and do something terrible to them. And I heard people saying things like, they're going to hurt me, they're going to, there were people saying things like, so there are people who were actually scared of something terrible, and there were, interestingly, people who would come to these protests for different reasons. I actually talked to a woman who was there because she thought that Ukraine this area of Ukraine should be taken over by Russia, because the factory that she works for is selling its products to Russia. And she thought that if Russia takes over, she's going to be she's been making a better salary. Basically, her factory is going to be doing better. Because so I was thinking, like, really, like you actually want to like change the borders of states in order to maybe get a better salary at your factory? But yeah, people were scared, and a lot of people were there for different reasons. So that got violent. I'm sorry, I need to. Sorry, it just starts playing it when I try to. So those protests turned into something violent when there were suddenly people with guns who claimed to be Ukrainians, but often turned out to be Russians, taking over like town halls in eastern Ukrainian cities. And Ukraine was kind of hesitating against like sending the troops there, because a lot of locals were supporting them, and it would have gotten really violent. A lot of civilians would have been killed. So Ukraine, and this is still like the interim government, and they are not very confident. So probably some time was lost there, and those militants that are, it is very well now documented that they are all connected to Russia and sponsored by Russia. They took over actually whole cities and territories there, and Ukraine tried to take it back. And what happened is the war is still going on, and over 13,000 people were killed, and a lot of them are civilians. And of course, you probably know the tragedy that happened in 2014 when the Malaysian Airlines flight MH17 was shut down over eastern Ukraine. That was a flight that was flying from Amsterdam to Malaysia, and it's part of some oversight or something. Even though there was already fighting in the area, like in the early stages, but there was already fighting. The aerospace was still open, so. People say that that's because at the time nobody knew that the militants, those pro-Russian militants, had the capacity, had the kind of weapons that can shoot down a plane. But actually, shortly before that, another plane, a military plane of Ukraine, was shot down, but it was flying on a very low altitude. So now people are saying that we didn't think like that. They can reach out and shoot down a plane that flies at 11,000 kilometers. I'm sorry, I don't know the miles, but yeah, it was very terrible. It's what happened was they didn't intentionally do it, as we now think. There is some evidence from early on that they thought that they're shooting down a military plane. But at the same time, it was flying way higher than a military plane would have been flying. So it's still the investigation was going on for years, and there is now a court in the Netherlands is deciding. They're basically trying some people in absentia who they believe are the ones who actually operated the weapons who shot down the plane. This is just another map showing like these are the areas that are now controlled by pro-Russian separatists and where the war is still happening. As you can see, it's not a big area compared to the rest of Ukraine, but still. And this is actually from this morning. This is a house in a village in Donetsk, so probably somewhere here, I think. Although probably it would be like on the border. So there was some shelling, and this is a civilian's house that was ruined this morning. 2 people were injured, but not killed. I talked about this already. The annexation of Crimea led to persecution of all the pro-Ukrainian activists in Crimea, and there's a population of Crimean Tatars in Crimea who were the first ones to suffer when Russia took over, because many of them are notoriously anti-Russian. Okay, so we now come to like the current political setting. I'll just rush through it. Okay, I'll be fast. So this is the first 5 presidents, kind of like looking kind of similar, like older guys, very serious looking. And this is today. This is our current president, Volodymyr Zelensky. Have you heard about him? He made the news when he won the election for a very particular reason. He's a comedian. He was a very famous comedian in Ukraine. These are just some photos. But yeah, he did this show. He did a lot of comedy shows, actually. He ran a very prominent production company that was really doing a lot, shooting movies. So he was probably one of the most recognized celebrities in Ukraine. But how does he win presidency? Like, what can any celebrity win? Can, like, I don't know, Mariah Carey be the next president, for example? So he played the president. He shot this comedy series for several years. He started in it, where he played a regular teacher who became president by accident. And he's like the normal guy in those elitist circles who's just trying to end the corruption, but he's frustrated a lot, but he's doing a good job. So imagine for 3 years that he's running on television, and everybody starts associating him with this honest president. And then he announces that he's going to actually run for president. And if you notice, like, so the election was 2019. The show also ended in 2019. They produced the last portion, the last season of the show right before the election. For obvious reasons. Yeah, and it led to memes like this. This says, countries where voice actor of Paddington Bear currently is the president, because Zelensky voiced Paddington Bear, and yeah. This is just a little bit, a little snippet that can explain to you why he won, except for the fact that his predecessor was accused of corruption and so on. But it's in Ukraine, but you don't have to understand it. You just have to like see what it's like. This is Volodymyr Zelensky telling his opponent, Petro Poroshenko, who's a sitting president. This is the sitting president in 2019. This is the guy who won right after the Euromaidan revolution, who was brought to power with the revolution. He's telling him in this video that he agrees to debate with him. And we have not had a presidential debate for I don't know how many years. They just didn't do it. So this is him announcing that he will do the debate.
Звертаюсь до Петра Порошенко. Ви кличете мене на дебати. Мріяли, що я втечу, відморожусь, заховаюсь. Ні, я це не ви у 14-му році. Я приймаю виклик. Ось мої умови. Чекаю на вас тут, на НСК Олімпійській. Дебати відбудуться перед народом України.
So he's telling him, I will debate you, but my condition is it's going to be at the country's biggest stadium for all the people to see it. And this is just I think at the end of this video he says, I give you 24 hours. Several hours later, Poroshenko comes out with a response, and just look at the response. A very different thing.
Володимире Олександровичу, я радий, що ви, хоч і якось не впевнено, але прийняли запрошення провести дебати. Ми з вами дуже...
That's it. He talks like that for 2 minutes. So do you sense the difference in there? Like this was like a professional, this was like a movie teaser with the music and him being all energetic and coming out to the stadium, and this is the response, kind of, you know. So Volodymyr Zelensky really put on a very good show during the campaign, and he did win. And he won in a landslide. He won in the second round when it was him against Poroshenko. He won over 70% of the vote that never before happened in Ukraine. I have to, okay, yeah. So yeah, I wanted to talk about a bit about the parliament setup, but I think that's actually the boring part. I can rush through it. I can actually go to the next one. August 2019, Zelensky is the president for only several months, and he gets a phone call from Donald Trump. And something interesting happens during the phone call. Donald Trump apparently asks him to open an investigation in Ukraine into the companies that hired the son of Joe Biden, who is Trump's opponent in the election. So, and then of course it comes out, and it comes out in September, and then there's the whole impeachment thing. Meanwhile, in Ukraine, nobody cares. Like nobody, like it's kind of reporting in the news as something funny that Ukraine is like suddenly is involved in the impeachment process of the president of the U.S., but it's not a major story in Ukraine at the time. And Zelensky was doing a very good job avoiding to talk about it. At any press conference, any briefing of any kind, all the Ukrainian journalists would ask about the Ukrainian issues. Every foreign journalist would ask about the phone call for several months. And he always gave very vague answers to that. So he actually avoided to talk about it. I can, if you have some questions about that later, I can answer them. But, oh yeah, a little story about free press in Ukraine. So this is the newspaper that I worked for 10 years, Kyiv Post. Founded in 1995, I've been there 10 years. This Monday, so 1 week ago, yeah, that's our beautiful newsroom. Actually, it's our previous newsroom. We moved to a different one. That's me in the upper left corner, giving comments to Chorus Awards of CNN, because that was during the phone call thing. So this Monday, the staff of the Kyiv Post comes to work only to learn that the newspaper is shut down. The owner, Adnan Kivan, a very rich developer who subsidized the newspaper, shut it down effectively immediately. Everybody's fired. Goodbye. Thank you. Then hours later, he announced that he will be relaunching it with a new management, with a new, and probably the new staff. So what we make of it is that it was because it came out, it happened following several weeks of certain tensions between the newsroom and the owner, who wanted to appoint somebody as an editor, and we were against that because that was interference in editorial independence, and we did not have confidence in that person. So there was certain pain points, certain tensions, and after that he fires everyone. So that's just a way to get rid of the journalists who try to be independent, and probably install those who would be very loyal and easy to manage. And I have to say here that, of course, in Ukraine, media are mostly used by rich owners to try to influence politics and protect their business interests. And this was one newsroom that objected to that, and who did not want to be, told what to write or what not to write about, or who to hire, and they were fired. So this is the photo of the staff earlier this week. I'm not there because I'm here. I had to live through it from Chicago. And they're actually now trying to, and I'm involved in that, we're trying to set up a new publication that's going to be independent. We're going to raise, do fundraising and crowdfunding, and try to set up something like the Kyiv Post, but without a rich owner who wants some compromises on editorial independence. So if you're interested, you can go to the website and read more about it. It's savethekyivpost.com. And that's it. Slava Ukraini is like the national salute that we do. And if you ever want to impress a Ukrainian person, you can tell them Slava Ukraini, and they'll be really impressed. Thank you.
So what we'll do now is we'll do a brief musical interlude to collect some contributions, and a brief Q&A at the end, if it's okay.
Sure. Thank you.
All right. So the Q&A will begin shortly. Viewers should be thinking about their questions. During this musical interlude, we will be collecting contributions. An online link will be posted in the YouTube chat. In-person audience members can scan posted QR codes. It's through our generosity that we show how meaningful the Sunday morning programs are. The suggested donation is $5. However, any amount that one is comfortable with is greatly appreciated. We appreciate all those who help sustain the society with their donations and of time and money. Start the Q&A portion at this point. In-person audience members can now line up at the podium to ask their questions. Please be brief as a courtesy to others who also want to speak. I'm going to step away from the podium so that Olga can speak, but there are a couple of questions already posted, so I'll start with those to begin with. Okay, first question. What is the Ukrainian reaction to Eugene Yevtushenko's poem, Babi Yar?
To what, sorry, come again?
To Eugene Yevtushenko's poem.
Okay. Evgeny Yevtushenko, Babi Yar. So I'm not a fan of Evgeny Yevtushenko at all, like his as a person or his poems. So I'm not actually familiar with the Babi Yar poem. The issue. So just to clarify, Babi Yar is an area in Kyiv where the mass killings, mostly of Jewish population, happened in 1941 when during the World War II, when the Germans took over Kyiv. And there were like Babi Yars, there were killings like that in basically in every city in Ukraine. This is a horrible tragedy. They basically killed tens of thousands of people, most of them Jewish, within weeks. And the way it took place, it was a raving, and they would just like line people up, shoot them, and then they would fall in and they would dug them in. Actually Babi Yar in Kyiv is exactly where I live. Like I'm actually like my apartment is next to it, and there's now a huge discussion happening in Ukraine about how to because there isn't actually in all the years since, there isn't actually a good like memorial or something there. It's something that marks this tragedy, because again, this was not talked about much in the Soviet times. So there's now a huge discussion about what to do with the area, how to make sure that this. Basically, they want to do a memorial, but they are in discussion about what the meaning should be and how it should be done. And there are people who want to give a lot of money for that, but there's a lot of contradicting viewpoints on what should the memorial signify and how it should be done. So that's what I can tell about the year right now. I mean, if that person can maybe reach out to me using an email, I can look at the poem, and I'm sure it's a famous poem. I'm ashamed that I don't know it, but not a fan of Yevtushenko, sorry.
Well, let me ask a more contemporary question. What can individuals in the U.S. do to support independent press in authoritarian countries? What organizations can we support financially?
To support independent press?
Yes.
So I can line up. I can follow up and line up some organizations in Ukraine. There are actually Western donors already doing a pretty good work in Ukraine with that, but there are also several media development organizations that accept donations, and they're doing things like providing support to local newsrooms in the form of resources and trainings and workshops, and training them even to try to break even, to training them in business activities and so on. So there are organizations who do a lot of that for journalists in Ukraine. So I think my answer is I can follow up with a list of that. Yeah.
Okay. Next question. Crimea's location and water access seems to make it an intensely valuable part of Ukraine. Is this the right assessment? What are the effects on Ukraine's economy of the annexation?
So I don't know if it's possible to put on the slides again so I can show the map. But anyway, yes, this is a correct assessment. It is very valuable because of its location. It's this outlying peninsula that has access both to the Black Sea and the little sea next to it that's called Azov Sea. Crimea also is the base for Russia's Black Sea Navy, the Black Sea Fleet, and so it's like an outlying forepost that can be used for military purposes. Economically, the region is not doing great. They are heavily subsidized by Russia at the moment, and a huge problem with Crimea right now is freshwater access, because before the annexation, Ukraine was supplying water to Crimea because Crimea has access to seawater but very little freshwater. So after the annexation happened, Ukraine stopped supplying water to Crimea, and Crimea has water shortages right now, and it's been a constant political issue, and it's also being feared. Okay, the map is on. So if you can, yeah. So there's a constant fear that Russia may invade even more. Why? Because if they could get this area, this coastal area, and connect the occupied territories in the east with Crimea, they can, first of all, cut off Ukraine from the Azov Sea here completely. And also they would get water for Crimea because they would reopen the channel that's somewhere here. So that's it.
A related question. What is public opinion in Crimea regarding the Russian annexation? Is there much popular support in Crimea for returning it to Ukraine?
It's a very good question. I don't remember when was the last time I saw a poll like that. I'm actually not sure how a poll like that would be even conducted in Crimea now. I don't think it's safe now to approach people in the streets asking, do you want to be a part of Ukraine again? I think Russia would have stopped that immediately. I can say that at the moment of annexation in 2014, a lot of people supported Crimea being part of Russia. We don't know exactly how many, because Russia held kind of like a referendum confirming that the majority of people want to be part of Russia, but the referendum was not trustworthy at all. It is possible that at the time, half of the Crimean population wanted to be part of Russia. Why? Because Russia has been working to achieve that public sentiment for decades before that. So Ukraine kind of neglected Crimea. Russia, meanwhile, tried to do everything for Crimea. There were a lot of Russian tourists coming to Crimea. Crimea is it's a very famous resort area, sea resort. It was more than that. I remember being in Crimea in something like 2010, I think, so 4 years before the annexation. And I saw there was a new building, a new apartment building under construction in one of the major cities. It was actually like the most pro-Russian city in Crimea, Sevastopol. And there was a banner on the building saying that to people with a Russian passport, there is a discount offered. So, yeah. And Russia was also giving away Russian passports to Crimeans freely for years. And Ukraine, because Ukraine's president was a pro-Russian guy, he kind of did not pay attention to that. So, yeah, it was the grounds for the annexation were prepared for many years.
Okay, so, I'm going to modify this question just a little bit. Can you give advice to other journalists or activists that would follow in your footsteps?
In what?
In journalism.
No, the end of it. Advice.
Advice on for journalists or activists.
In advice as of.
Well, I guess just what was helpful to you in becoming a very proactive and influential journalist and activist in Ukraine?
I'm not an activist. I want to clarify that. I'm a
Sure.
journalist. But I think the best thing you can do is try to get access to some good journals, try to work with some good journalists, and you can do that by almost every newsroom is doing unpaid interns programs. So if you can offer yourself as an intern to like the best newsroom, the best newspaper that you know about, that would help more than anything. That would help more than going to any J school. So I think that's my advice. Try to work with the best.
What do you think is going to happen when Zelensky's term is up? And where do things stand now between the U.S. and Ukraine and Russia?
So Zelensky's term is up in 3 years. 2 years. Sorry, 2 years. 2 years. 3 years. That's embarrassing. And he initially, when he ran for president, he vowed that he would not seek re-election. But now there is increasing belief that he will, in fact, do that, because he won't. The progress of reforms that he was trying to do really slowed down after the first several months, because his momentum was sort of gone, and there was a lot of infighting in the team. So I personally think that he will seek re-election, and I personally think that he will likely get it if he does, unless something very different happens in the next couple of years. But as of now, he's still, of course, his support declined, but it's still pretty solid. So he has a good chance at winning the re-election. And as of now, to be honest, the only candidates that could challenge him is his predecessor, Petro Poroshenko, who will probably try to run again. And there are also pro-Russian candidates, which would be a disaster for Ukraine. But I don't believe in good faith. I don't believe that a pro-Russian candidate can win in Ukraine anytime again. And you asked about the U.S., Ukraine, and Russia. So Ukraine, unfortunately, we often say that we are very lucky with how we are located, because we are like this between Europe and Asia, between East and West. That's actually been in many ways not so great for us, because Ukraine, because of its connection, because of its location next to Russia, it's the biggest country next to Russia, with a very strong pro-Western sentiment in the public. It's actually being kind of you can say held hostage to the situation. It's the West really wants to keep Ukraine out of Russian influence, because it would really strengthen Russia if Russia takes control of Ukraine. And Russia really wants Ukraine. So we're kind of this buffer country, and both sides really want us to not fall to the other side. But at the same time, Ukraine was dealt a very big blow by the West several months ago when this happened. Yeah, that was our cover, betrayal. So the West, and by the West in this case, I mean the US and Germany, allowed the construction of Nord Stream 2, which is a gas pipe that brings gas from Russia to Europe. So before, like originally, for many years, Russia would go through Ukraine. There's a pipe going through the territory of Ukraine that is sending gas to Europe, and it gave us a good leverage in all the negotiations with Russia. But Russia built Nord Stream and Nord Stream 2, and now Ukraine is going to lose that. First of all, it's a very good source of revenue for the budget, but also it's going to lose the leverage that it had in negotiations with Russia, because Russia does not depend on Ukraine anymore to transfer gas to Europe. Also, it strengthens Europe's dependence on Russia supplying gas and supplying it at the prices that are, So basically, this is this has been very bad for us, but it's gonna be probably even worse for Europe in the long term. But they did it.
I think that's the end of the questions for now. Thank you so much for
Thank
this
you.
informative and sobering talk.
Thank you. Thank you.
I would like to close the event with a quote. Here's the closing quote. "The wind in Ukraine blows very hard and cold at this moment, but it will not always be so. And where there is love, there's always enough warmth for the human soul to thrive." And that is from A Short History of Tractors in Ukrainian by Marina Luetka. Thank you.